Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Compared to inserting needles, removing them was a lot easier. All the needles on Alfred's body were cleared in less than 10 minutes. After checking his condition, Roxanne began to pack her things. In the meantime, Jonathan and Frida stood anxiously by the bedside. Previously, all the famous doctors they had sought failed to produce any results. Therefore, they weren't sure if Alfred was able to wake up this time. Under their attentive gaze, Alfred's fingers began to curl slightly. In the next second, his eyes gradually opened and he began to grimace while coughing weakly. "Grandpa!" As Jonathan sat down to help Alfred regain his breath, the former's eyes were filled with both shock and delight. Frida, too, was so stunned that she was at a loss for words. Despite her lack of faith in Roxanne, her grandfather had woken up due to Roxanne's treatment. "Grandpa, how do you feel?" Jonathan asked with concern once Alfred had stopped coughing. Alfred nodded slightly and replied in an extremely hoarse voice, "How long have I been asleep for?" Just when Jonathan was about to answer, Roxanne walked over after she was done packing. "It would be better if old Mr. Queen doesn't speak too much now, for he needs a lot more rest." Nodding in response, Jonathan carefully helped Alfred lay back down. After that, he got to his feet and expressed his gratitude. "Dr. Jarvis, I couldn't thank you enough. Also, I would like to apologize for our ignorance over doubting you previously. The mistake was ours, as you're clearly an extraordinary doctor." After accepting his gratitude and apology, Roxanne reminded, "Even though old Mr. Queen has woken up, his prognosis still looks bleak. He needs at least 6 to 7 more treatments before he can truly turn the corner." Jonathan nodded repeatedly. "Also, I'll prescribe some medicine for him to supplement his health, as it will help with the treatment. After all, the damage that old Mr. Queen's body has suffered is significant. As future treatments require him to be strong enough, I'm worried that he might not be able to withstand it," Roxanne continued. Jonathan naturally had no objections as he nodded in agreement. "Don't worry. We will comply with all your instructions regarding Grandpa's treatment." Nodding slightly, Roxanne retrieved a bottle of pills from her bag. "Here, take 2 pills 3 times a day after meals." Subsequently, she took out a piece of paper and wrote a prescription for him. "Based on the quantity I've written here, get 10 batches of them. Every day, add them into a soup for old Mr. Queen to drink. This way, it will hasten his recovery." Jonathan acknowledged, "All right. We'll follow your instructions." After going into the details a little more, Roxanne realized it was getting late when she checked the time. Thinking of her 2 sons waiting for her at home, she got up to leave. "I think it's time for me to go, but I'll be coming back tomorrow. In the meantime, call me if old Mr. Queen has any problems." With that, she headed to the door with her medical bag in hand. Glancing at Roxanne's leaving silhouette, Jonathan called out to her, "Dr. Jarvis, other than treating Grandpa, I'm sure you have some other reason for being here." Stopping abruptly in her tracks, Roxanne suddenly remembered her objective for coming over. "But old Mr. Queen hasn't recovered fully yet. So, Jonathan." When Jonathan saw her stop, he softened his tone. "Don't you want to talk about it first before leaving?" Jonathan's intentions couldn't be more obvious. Even though she didn't bring up the matter of medicine supply, he was cognizant of her agenda. In fact, he was also interested in exploring the matter with her. However, Roxanne hesitated at being rewarded for a task she had yet to complete. After all, the Queen family had initially declared that they would only supply medicine at half price to whoever that cured Alfred. When she didn't say a word, Jonathan simply stared at her with a grin. Roxanne smiled back. "To be honest, I did come here to treat old Mr. Queen after a friend told me that your family was willing to sell medicine at half price to whoever cured him. But now that he has only just awakened and his condition hasn't stabilized, I don't think it's appropriate to talk about the reward. At the very least, we can wait till his situation makes a turn for the better. Jonathan's smile broadened upon hearing Roxanne's answer. He then replied with even greater sincerity, "Dr. Jarvis, the fact that Grandpa is awake is already a miracle to us. As for his follow-up treatment, we have the utmost confidence in you. Consequently, you have earned the right for us to discuss your reward." Surprised at how much faith he had in her, Roxanne was briefly stunned. When she finally regained her senses, she took a seat on the couch. "You were recommended by Dr. Galloway. When he came to see Grandpa back then, he did bring up the situation at the Research Institute. However, since he was unable to help Grandpa, the matter ended up in limbo." Jonathan explained further, "Now that he has sent you here, I'm sure it has something to do with the Research Institute. Is my guess spot on?" Roxanne nodded slightly before relating the Research Institute's situation to him. "The Research Institute is currently working on a few projects. Unfortunately, progress is being held back by the lack of medicines. As a result, we've been searching for a medicine supplier whom we can work with. Unfortunately, we ended up being rejected by everyone in Horrington. With no other choice, Colby thought of the Queen family and figured that I should give it a try." Looking at Jonathan, Roxanne explained earnestly, "Of course, even without the reward, I would still do my best to treat old Mr. Queen. The reward is nothing more than a bonus to me." When Roxanne's serious expression earned Jonathan's further respect, he repeated, "I would like to apologize again for the doubt I've shown you earlier. You truly are an exceptional doctor." Acknowledging his praise, Roxanne stared intently at Jonathan while waiting for him to discuss the medicine supply. With no time to waste, Jonathan jumped right into it after gaining an understanding of the situation. "Now that Grandpa has awoken after receiving your treatment, we hope that you will continue taking good care of him. As for the reward promised by our family, I have the authority to make a decision. As a start, I will provide the Research Institute with its first batch of medicine free of charge as a sign of our gratitude. Subsequently, our family will sign a long-term contract with the Institute to supply medicine at half price." Roxanne gradually understood the situation. After watching Alfred regain consciousness from her treatment, Jonathan was thoroughly convinced that she could cure him. As for the first batch of free medicine, it was both a gift and also an effort to reassure her. After all, that batch would solve the urgent shortage at the Research Institute, allowing her to concentrate on curing Alfred without any distractions. Needless to say, Jonathan's proposal was extremely tempting. "All right. Please rest assured that I will do my best to cure old Mr. Queen." Upon hearing her promise, Jonathan replied with a smile, "Your words have put my mind at ease. Anyway, I'll get the contract drafted tomorrow. When the time comes, all you need to do is sign it." Roxanne nodded in acknowledgement. With the matter of the reward settled, Jonathan personally escorted her to the door and watched her drive away. Only when her car disappeared from sight did he return to the house and give Lucian a call. "How is old Mr. Queen?" The moment the call connected, Lucian's voice rang out with the sound of water flowing in the background. Jonathan answered with a grin, "He's already awake. Dr. Jarvis is amazing." Recalling how awkward Lucian and Roxanne behaved earlier, he asked curiously, "Lucian, are you acquainted with Dr. Jarvis prior to this? I just feel as if something is amiss between both of you. Furthermore, I've never seen you behave that way with another woman before." Even though he made things difficult for her, he stood up for her at the same time. In the beginning, Jonathan really thought that Lucian didn't take Roxanne seriously. However, after watching Lucian help her and even insisting that Frida apologize to her, he had no idea what to think. His hunch told him that both of them knew each other, but it was impossible for him to guess what sort of relationship they had. Lucian's concern for Alfred was the only reason why he took Jonathan's call. Hence, the question caused his expression to darken. "I don't know her. If I did, I would already have gotten her to treat old Mr. Queen." Before Jonathan could reply, Lucian hung up, triggering the former's curiosity. Somehow Lucian's tone just now was really awkward. Do they really not know one another? By the time Roxanne reached home, it was already late at night. Madeline was playing Lego with the boys in the living room. The moment the three of them saw Roxanne, they dropped the Lego in their hands and welcomed her home together. "Mommy." The two boys threw themselves into her arms and asked in a concerned tone, "Why did you come back so late? All of us are already sleepy." Both of them yawned with their eyes about to close. Roxanne tousled their hair. "I'm sorry for letting all of you wait that long." Raising her gaze, she wanted to thank Madeline. Sensing what she was about to say, Madeline waved her hands. "Don't worry about it. Both of them are my godsons after all. As for you, have you had your dinner yet? It's already so late." Roxanne shook her head. "I didn't manage to eat as I was caught up with work." She had lost track of time while treating Alfred and discussing the supply of medicine with Jonathan. However, now that Roxanne had reminded her of it, she began to feel her stomach growling. Madeline gave her an annoyed look. "I knew this would happen whenever you're busy. Therefore, I set aside a portion of dinner. You should quickly have some." The boys, too, urged her to eat as they herded her to the dining table. Warmed by their gesture, Roxanne took a few bites while Madeline and the kids stayed by her side. When she saw that Roxanne was almost done with her food, Madeline inquired, "Considering how late you came back today, is the patient's condition serious? How is the progress?" Roxanne nodded with a smile. "It is. Nonetheless, I'm confident of curing him still. On top of that, I'll also be able to solve the supply issue at the Research Institute." With that thought in mind, Roxanne's mood improved dramatically. Madeline, too, had just as much faith. "Since you're confident in doing so, I trust that you'll definitely be able to cure him." After some idle chatter, Madeline took her leave as it was already late. In the meantime, the boys followed Roxanne around. After tidying up the room for a bit, she finally had time for them. "Did you enjoy yourselves at kindergarten today? Did you get into fights with your friends?" After recalling the events of the day, the boys responded with a forceful nod. "We had a good time. When school was over, they even gave us a lot of snacks." Roxanne couldn't help but smile. "It seems both of you are really popular." Benny nodded earnestly before glancing in Archie's direction. "In fact, there's a girl today who declared that she wants to marry Archie when she grows up." "Really?" Roxanne gave her son an amused look. Briefly stunned, Archie threw his brother a glance before blushing all the way to his ears. "Yes, but I didn't agree to it." Pinching his ear, Benny made a face at Archie. When she saw how the boys were fooling around, Roxanne beamed with satisfaction. Even though it was already late, the boys clung to her and related to her everything that happened in kindergarten. Most of the time, Benny would have a whole lot to say while Archie would summarize his words. As for Roxanne, she would listen intently and let out the occasional laugh when she saw how cute they were. When she finally checked the time, it was almost 10. "Time for bed. You still have school tomorrow." She coaxed the children, putting on a serious expression. Complying obediently, both of them went upstairs to sleep. The next morning, Roxanne dropped them off at the kindergarten before heading to the Research Institute. Once the morning meeting was over, she came out of the conference room together with Colby. "How did it go yesterday? Did you manage to treat old Mr. Queen's sickness?" Colby inquired. Roxanne nodded slightly. Although his condition appears to be serious and complex treatment is needed, it's still possible to cure him, but it will take quite a bit of time. As I'll be going over often the next few days, you'll have to hold the fort around here for the time being. Filled with admiration, Colby teased, "I'm amazed you're able to treat a sickness that has baffled all the famous doctors sought out by the Queen family. Dr. Jarvis, your words make us feel ashamed of ourselves." Even though he was joking, there was truth to his words. After all, he was one of the doctors who was also stumped by Alfred's condition. Roxanne downplayed the matter with a smile. It just happens to fall into my area of specialty. When he saw the nonchalant look on her face, Colby's heart throbbed. By the way, even though old Mr. Queen hasn't fully recovered, the Queen family has agreed to supply us with the medicine and will likely be able to sign the contract today. In fact, the first batch is provided free of charge. This not only solves our urgent shortage, but we will also not have to worry about supply anymore. Roxanne's face lit up at the thought of having secured the supply of medicine. Colby cocked his brow in surprise. Really? The Queen family are actually willing to sign a contract with us even though old Mr. Queen has just regained consciousness? Roxanne nodded with a grin. Upon her confirmation, Colby praised, "It's clear that they have been blown away by your medical skills. You truly are amazing." Roxanne chuckled casually. "I'm just doing what I can. Hopefully there will not be any untoward developments when it comes to old Mr. Queen's condition. With you running the show, I'm sure everything will be fine," Colby answered with conviction. Cognizant that Madeline had helped her pick up the boys 2 days in a row, Roxanne planned to pick them up herself that day. Thus she headed to the Queen residence in the afternoon after finishing her work in the morning. After she arrived, she examined Alfred to make sure there weren't any complications before continuing his treatment by inserting needles. While waiting for the time to remove the needles, Jonathan approached with a document in hand. "Dr. Jarvis, here's the contract I've prepared. If you're fine with the terms, you can just sign on it." Roxanne wasn't surprised, as that was what they discussed the night before. After going through the document in detail, she placed her signature at the bottom. With the contract signed, Jonathan's attitude toward her grew warmer. "From now on, we have become partners. Nevertheless, we'll still need your help with regards to Grandpa's condition." Roxanne nodded in acknowledgement. "That's the least I can do." After a brief chat, Roxanne looked at the time and extracted the needles from Alfred's body. Even though she had tried her best to rush, school had already ended for the boys by the time she finished packing. Taking her leave quickly, Roxanne drove to pick them up. Along the way, she wondered if they would be worried since she didn't inform them that she would be late. By the time she arrived, all the students were gone, leaving behind an empty kindergarten. Upon scanning the surroundings, Roxanne saw the 2 boys sitting on a small bench in the field, but there was no sign of any teachers at all. As a result, she hurried up to them anxiously. "Mommy," the boys ran in her direction the instant they saw her. Hugging them, she knelt down to stroke their faces. "I'm sorry. I was busy and lost track of time." Archie gave her an understanding shake of his head. "It's all right. We're safe in the kindergarten. Plus, there's a teacher here with us. There's no need for you to be worried." Benny, too, gave a corresponding nod. Roxanne gave them a confused look. "A teacher?" Archie pointed at the corner of the field. Trailing the trajectory of his finger, Roxanne saw a teacher by the slide. With a warm smile on her face, she was kneeling on the ground while speaking to a little girl. Looking adorable in her kindergarten uniform, the girl had her hands tensely placed on her knees while sitting in an upright position. At the same time, she was staring intently in their direction. The moment she recognized the girl, Roxanne was stunned. If my memory serves me right, that's clearly Lucian's daughter. Is she studying here too? Initially, Estella was just watching Archie and Benny. However, the moment she saw Roxanne, her eyes lit up. Realizing that Roxanne was looking at her, her lips curled up in delight as she attempted to greet the former. But the very next second, Roxanne looked away, causing Estella's smile to fade as she gave them a dejected stare. "She obviously recognizes me but chooses to ignore me. Mommy, what's wrong? Are you tired from work?" Archie shook Roxanne's hand when he noticed her looking distracted. Regaining her senses, Roxanne replied with a grin, "Not at all." With that, Benny happily grabbed her hands and exclaimed, "In that case, let's go home." Roxanne gave him a noncommittal nod before leading the boys over to greet the teacher. Just before she left, her gaze subconsciously fell upon Estella again. When she saw that the three of them were about to go, Estella stood up anxiously while staring intently at them. Worried that she would fall, the teacher quickly held on to her. After a brief hesitation, Roxanne couldn't help inquiring out of concern. Is she well aware of what she was about to ask? The boys answered right away, Mommy, she's a student here too. In fact, she's in the same class as we are. Since her daddy and mommy have yet to pick her up, she was waiting together with us. Nodding in acknowledgement, Roxanne's heart melted slightly at the sight of Estella. Nevertheless, she didn't intend to stay, for it will either be Lucien or Aubrey who would be picking Estella up soon, neither of whom she had any intention of seeing again. However, Estella was visibly reluctant to see her go. Not wanting to disappoint her, Roxanne stroked Estella's head with a smile. Your parents will be here soon. As I need to go first, you must obey the teacher and wait together with her, all right? Just as Roxanne was about to leave, Estella grabbed her sleeve tightly. Halted by Estella's reaction, Roxanne lowered her gaze and saw the former shaking her head with slightly reddened eyes. The look on Estella's face caused Roxanne to feel so heavy-hearted that she couldn't bring herself to move. When the teacher saw Estella refusing to let Roxanne leave, she sighed in resignation before approaching the latter to explain. Estella has recently been very close to Archie and Benny. Due to her autistic character, very few students are willing to play with her. But the very first day the brothers came to class, they ended up protecting her. That's why she has grown to rely on both of them. And now she's probably scared that they're leaving. After hearing about Estella's situation, Roxanne could feel the discomfort within her intensify. Not only is the little girl mute, but she's also autistic. No wonder the teacher let the boys wait by the side. Unfortunately, the thought of running into Lucien and Aubrey caused Roxanne to feel hesitant about staying behind. Despite the teacher's coaxing, Estella refused to let Roxanne go no matter what. After a while, the teacher appealed, Ms. Jarvis, are you rushing for time? If not, shall we chat a little? Ever since Archie and Benny came to school, I have yet to speak to you about their progress. It was clear to Roxanne that the teacher was just getting her to wait with Estella under the pretext of discussing the boys' performance in school. At the same time, Estella too threw her a hopeful gaze. Faced with the look in Estella's eyes, Roxanne, who was about to decline, couldn't bring herself to say it. In the end, she swallowed her words and nodded at the teacher. In response, Estella's eyes glistened as she discreetly leaned into Roxanne while holding the latter's sleeve. From afar, it looked as if she was leaning in Roxanne's arms. I remember that you came back from overseas together with Archie and Benny. Considering that they grew up overseas, I'm surprised at how well they speak Chinean. Since the chat was just an excuse, the teacher talked about trivial matters, as Archie and Benny's performances in class were so impressive that there was nothing to complain about. Roxanne nodded with a smile. That's because there were still many Chineans around to converse with them. Meanwhile, the boys didn't say a word and merely smiled obediently. They would simply nod at whatever their mother said. Seeing how well-behaved they were, the teacher couldn't help but gush in admiration. Other than Chinean and Austronesian, they seem to be able to speak Filipinian too, don't they? Ah! They probably picked it up from my colleagues overseas. Roxanne caressed the boy's hair. Impressed, the teacher exclaimed, I must say, they are exceptionally smart to not only have mastered 3 languages at such a young age but also the elementary school curriculum too. Coupled with their exquisite features, you really do have exceptional children. Roxanne beamed with pride at the praise. You flatter us. They're just ordinary children who enjoy learning. While they were chatting, Roxanne continued to be vigilant about whether someone was coming to pick Estella up. Upon checking the time, she realized that a long while had passed. Filled with sudden concern, she asked, by the way, when will the girls' parents arrive? The teacher looked at her watch and answered, probably soon. After nodding in response, Roxanne lowered her gaze at Estella. The latter was still standing beside her while maintaining her grip on Roxanne's sleeve as if she was fearful of Roxanne leaving. Resigning herself to the fact that she couldn't leave, Roxanne turned to the boys. "Can you boys go to the car first and wait for me there?" Nodding obediently, both of them walked to the kindergarten's entrance. Once she saw them get into the car, Roxanne recovered her gaze. It was prudent to keep the boys out of the way since she couldn't avoid meeting those two. At the kindergarten entrance, Archie and Benny got into the car one after another before looking out the window. "Why do you think Mommy asked us to come out here?" Benny wondered while holding his chin. Archie put their school bags away before joining his brother at the window. "Because Daddy is about to arrive. For some strange reason, Mommy doesn't want us to meet Daddy. However, she isn't aware that we have discovered Daddy's true identity and even know what he looks like." As the boys continued to stare outside, a Rolls-Royce dramatically pulled up by the street. A towering man in a long-sleeved shirt and pants alighted from it. Ever since the car appeared, Benny monitored it closely. When the man came out of the car, he locked his gaze on the man and gave Archie a nudge. "Archie, look. Can that be Daddy?" After turning his head to glance at the man, Archie nodded with conviction. "Without a doubt, that's the man I saw on the internet." Upon receiving Archie's confirmation, Benny couldn't help but praise aloud, "Daddy looks a lot more dashing in real life compared to the picture." Just as he spoke, Archie shot him a glare. "Didn't I tell you that you're not allowed to like him?" With a sullen expression, Archie glared at the man outside as if he was their mortal enemy. "This is the man who abandoned Mommy and us." After being admonished by his brother, Benny zipped his mouth sheepishly. Meanwhile, Lucian didn't notice the boys in the car as he strode into the kindergarten, well aware that he was late. The moment he stepped in, he saw two figures by the slide together with Estella, who had squeezed herself into Roxanne's arms by then. "Mr. Farwell, you're here," the teacher greeted respectfully when she saw Lucian. Lucian nodded in acknowledgement as he walked up to them. After throwing his daughter a glance, he stared coldly at Roxanne. "Why are you here?" Sensing his hostility, Roxanne knitted her brows in confusion. The teacher then looked at them in surprise. "Do you know each other?" Just a while ago she had assumed that Roxanne didn't know Estella. However, considering how dependent Estella was on Roxanne, she figured that it wasn't such a surprise at all. After nodding at the teacher without answering the question, Roxanne shifted her attention toward Lucian. "I came here to pick my boys up. It was your daughter who refused to let go of my clothes, forcing me to stay here with her." The moment he heard the words "your daughter" roll off her tongue, Lucian's expression darkened. How can she say such a thing in front of her own daughter? What a heartless woman. Unaware of what she had said wrong, Roxanne saw a sudden change in Lucian's expression as he turned his attention to Estella. "Come here." Lucian reached out his hand grimly. After glancing at Lucian's outstretched hand, Estella raised her gaze and gave Roxanne a reluctant and pitiful look. "Just when I finally got the chance to be with her, why does Daddy have to be so fierce?" As the seconds ticked by, Lucian's expression turned darker when Estella refused to let go of Roxanne. In the end, Roxanne lowered her gaze and tousled Estella's hair before reassuring her, "Your daddy is here to pick you up, and I have to go too. So you should go home with him now." After that, Roxanne stood back up, planning to leave the instant Estella released her grip. In spite of that, Estella adamantly refused regardless of how gloomy Lucian looked. Instead, she continued to give Roxanne a pleading look. For some inexplicable reason, she loved staying by Roxanne's side, to the extent of wanting to follow the latter home. As the tension in the air began to build, the teacher felt the need to defuse the situation. Before she could, she saw Lucian making his move all of a sudden. Walking up to Estella, Lucian asserted in an authoritative voice, "Estella Farwell, let go and come home with me." Shaken by his tone, the little girl ended up tightening her grip on Roxanne and leaning closer to her by reflex. As she was already standing by the edge of the slide, she lost her balance while shifting her legs without looking. With her heart skipping a beat, Roxanne managed to stop Estella from falling by reaching out to catch her. Subsequently, Estella refused to let Roxanne go, leaving the latter with no choice but to hug her in case she fell again. Having calmed her down, Roxanne couldn't help but frown. "Lucian, if you're upset with me, you should just vent your frustrations at me instead of the child." Even though Lucian had seen the same event unfold, he didn't manage to get to Estella in time. Therefore, he retorted upon hearing Roxanne's comments, "How is the way I treat my daughter any of your business? Don't think that just because she likes you, it gives you the right to get involved." The tension between them felt as if it could explode at any moment. In response to his mocking tone, Roxanne's expression darkened as an inexplicable sense of anger swelled within her. After Roxanne's anger receded, she realized how funny the situation was. "Indeed, I don't have any rights. In his eyes, I never had any." She dropped her gaze to the floor, concealing the self-deprecation in them. Without saying anything, she forced herself to remove Estella's grip from her sleeve. Estella's little fingers wanted to reach for her again, but Roxanne grabbed it mid-air. "Archie and Benny are still waiting for me in the car. I have to go to them. Be a good girl and go with your dad." Roxanne ruffled Estella's head gently and released the latter's hand. With a hurried farewell to the teacher, Roxanne turned on her heels and rushed out the front door without another glance back. Back in the car, Archie and Benny were sitting upright. When they saw Roxanne getting in the car, they asked innocently, "Mommy, what's wrong?" Roxanne sucked in a deep breath before plastering a forced smile. "Nothing. Let's go home." She started up the car and pulled away from the kindergarten. Meanwhile, Lucian was still rooted in place. Shooting a sharp gaze at the teacher, he asked, "Are her sons attending here too?" The teacher didn't know what went on between the two parents but could sense the tension coming off of Lucian. Feeling the pressure, the teacher answered hesitantly, "Yeah. Ms. Jarvis' twins attend our kindergarten." Before the teacher could finish, he interrupted coldly, "When did they start?" "Just a few days ago," the teacher replied carefully. "Inform the head of the kindergarten to remove the boys from the list. If you don't do as I ask, Farwell Group won't be investing in this kindergarten anymore." Lucian's expression turned hostile. Not allowing the teacher the time to digest his words, he carried Estella into his arms and strode to the front door. Upon arriving at the parking lot, Lucian noticed the car parked beside his was already gone. Withdrawing his gaze, he carried Estella into the car without a pause in his step. The minute he got into the car, Estella struggled violently in his arms. Lucian loosened his grip on her, letting her crawl to the other side of the seat. Estella took out her notebook angrily and scribbled something on it with force. A while later, her hand stopped. Estella was furious this time as she turned her notebook around and sat there glaring at Lucian instead of crawling over to him to yank on his sleeve for his attention. Lucian sighed silently and turned his head over to peer at Estella with a frown. The entire length of the paper only had one sentence scribbled across it. "Why are you not letting Archie and Benny come to kindergarten?" Seeing Lucian finally turn his attention to her, Estella angrily shoved the notebook closer to his face. The crease between Lucian's brows deepened at her actions. He withdrew his gaze and said, "No particular reason. I did it because I could and wanted to. That's the answer I can give if you insist on one." Upon finishing his sentence, he heard movement coming from the seat beside him. He turned and saw Estella angrily throw her notebook to the side and clung to the door. She even leaned her head out of the window. Despite not saying anything, her whole body was exuding an "I don't want to look at you" vibe. Lucian arched his brow at her body language. "You getting mad isn't going to change my mind." Estella furiously snapped her head to him and shot him a death glare. "Daddy is the worst. I hate Daddy the most. I like the beautiful Ms. Jarvis and Archie and Benny. Why did Daddy have to fight with her and even forbade Archie and Benny to attend kindergarten? Estella was crestfallen at the thought of never being able to see Archie and Benny at the kindergarten anymore. Daddy is too unreasonable. I don't want to like him anymore. Estella sulked the whole way back. She ignored Lucian, who was trailing after her, and dashed up the stairs to her room without one glance back at him. After slamming the door, she even locked the door angrily. Catalina was standing at the door when the father and daughter arrived, so she noticed Estella's angry mood. When she shifted her gaze to the expressionless Lucian walking behind Estella, she knew they were once again at outs with each other. "Mr. Farwell, what is Ms. Estella angry about?" Hearing the loud slamming from the door upstairs, Catalina turned to Lucian with a concerned look. Recalling the reason Estella got mad at him, Lucian answered impassively, "Nothing. She's just throwing a tantrum. Look after her." Catalina nodded habitually, "Yes, sir." I wonder why Ms. Estella would lose her temper with Mr. Farwell when she was rarely expressive. Moreover, Mr. Farwell isn't good at coaxing others. All in all, we need a lady of the house. Estella was only mad at Lucian, so she obediently opened her door when Catalina knocked on it. "Ms. Estella, come and have something to eat." Catalina carried a tray of Estella's favorite food into her room. Alas, Estella didn't have an appetite. After taking 2 bites of the food, she pushed the plate away and sat gloomily by the desk. Catalina's heart ached for the little girl. However, she knew this was something between father and daughter, so she wasn't in any position to give any advice. She took the food back to the kitchen and came back to help Estella shower after a few hours later. After cleaning up the bathroom, Catalina saw Estella lying on her stomach on her bed, staring at the laptop in front of her with a hardened look. She wondered what the little girl was doing tapping on the keyboard so seriously. However, Catalina was used to Estella tapping away on the keyboard, so she silently left the room after cleaning up without asking anything. Meanwhile, Roxanne was stuck in a traffic jam on her way back with Archie and Benny. Archie and Benny silently sat in the back seat, occasionally exchanging glances with each other, all the while studying their mom's expression through the rearview mirror. They didn't know what happened at the kindergarten earlier. Even though Roxanne didn't tell them anything, they noticed that she was in a bad mood. "Mommy, we made some cards at the kindergarten today. The teacher had us make it for the people we love, so Archie and I made one for you." Benny secretly cast a glance at Archie, hinting at him to cheer their mother up. Archie nodded with understanding. "Mommy, do you want to know what we wrote?" Roxanne knew they were trying to lift her mood, so she nodded with a smile. "Sure. What did you guys write?" Sounds of someone shuffling through the bag came from the back, then Benny's emotional voice read loudly. "The person I love the most is Mommy. My mommy is an amazing doctor. Even though she's always busy with work, my brother and I know she loves us the most. We think Mommy is a great person for saving lives every day. Sometimes we would feel bad for her and wish she won't get too busy and tire herself out. I hope Mommy will stay beautiful forever." Roxanne couldn't keep her giggle in. "It's so long. It was no wonder your teacher would tell me you guys excelled in Chilean. What about you, Archie?" Archie sat up straight and began reading aloud. "My mommy is an amazing doctor. Saving lives is a difficult job, and so is taking care of my brother and me. I want to be like her when I grow up. I wish I can grow up quickly and earn money for my family so Mommy doesn't have to be so tired all the time." Roxanne's heart melted into a puddle at their heartfelt confessions. She had thrown out everything that happened at the kindergarten earlier out of her mind. "Thank you, boys." The kids exchanged glances and released a relieved breath simultaneously when they noticed her mood had brightened. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.